Everywhere you look, there's something to worry about. Economic inequality, war in the Middle East, the price of eggs for Pete's sake, how much our kids are using social media, how much we are using social media, whether we've actually forgiven our father, why we can't sleep, is our marriage okay, is my job secure, will I have enough for retirement? The list just goes on and on and on and on. And apologies in advance if this is sparking any new spirals. But this is your constant hum, too, isn't it? This is Everything Happens, and I'm Kate Bowler. Anxiety feels like it's at a fever pitch, and it's not always wrong. Sometimes fear is a perfectly reasonable response to the world as it is. Everywhere you look, there's something to worry about. Economic inequality, war in the Middle East, the price of eggs for Pete's sake, how much our kids are using social media, how much we are using social media, whether we've actually forgiven our father, why we can't sleep, is our marriage okay, is my job secure, will I have enough for retirement? The list just goes on and on and on and on. And apologies in advance if this is sparking any new spirals. But this is your constant hum, too, isn't it? This is Everything Happens, and I'm Kate Bowler. Anxiety feels like it's at a fever pitch, and it's not always wrong. Sometimes fear is a perfectly reasonable response to the world as it is. But sometimes it's a flashing check engine light, a signal from our bodies or our minds that something needs tending. So today we're talking about anxiety with one of the smartest, kindest, most attuned people that I've ever met, Dr. Ellen Vora. Ellen and I are going to be talking about different kinds of anxiety, like false anxiety, that hummy feeling that you can reasonably trace to that third espresso, or true anxiety, the kind that whispers from somewhere deeper, something's not right here. Let's see if we can listen a little closer and find a way forward together. Dr. Ellen Vora is one of those rare doctors who treats the whole person, mind, body, and spirit. Ellen went to medical school at Columbia University. She's also a board certified psychiatrist, acupuncturist, yoga teacher, and the author of an absolutely spectacular book called The Anatomy of Anxiety. She is also a dear friend and one of my very favorite people to talk about what is actually going on underneath the surface. Ellen, welcome to my podcast, which is my excuse to hang out with my friends professionally.
Thank you, Kate. I missed that whole thing. I was in a daze, just mesmerized by your eyes, but it's so good to be here.
Welcome to my vortex. If you don't mind my historian's hat right away, I've just been really thinking about something and I wanted to know what you thought about it. Every age seems to know something intimately about anxiety. Like in the 1930s, anxiety was global. Authoritarianism, war, that terrifying sense that everything could unravel all at once. And then in the 1970s, that fear turned inward. So it became more personal. We saw the rise of therapeutic culture, self help, inner work, the idea that maybe if we could fix something about ourselves, maybe we could fix the world. But now, what is now? It feels like we're in some kind of strange combination of both. So, like, first of all, does that analysis sound remotely right to you?
I think that what feels true to me is that the way I describe it, the pH of our age seems to be anxiety. Like in every age, people are getting out of balance. And then how they subjectively suffer does seem to have a fingerprint with different eras, different generations. This moment, when we're out of balance, when we're suffering, the word we use to describe that is commonly anxiety. But I think that word lacks granularity to capture all of the ways that we are lacking community, tuning into the way things are lightly apocalyptic, late stage capitalism, all the way to the fact that I think we are very inflamed and overfed, undernourished, underslept, overscreened, and we're just out of balance in physical and psychospiritual ways.
Let's start with that incredible diagnosis then of the age and the common language of anxiety. 1 in 9 people have been diagnosed with a mental health disorder, and anxiety is among the most prevalent. But you say something surprising. This is you. Anxiety is not what's wrong with you. It's your body and mind fiercely alerting you that something else is wrong. Tell me what you mean by that.
Oof. Okay. Sit back and relax. I think a lot of the way we approach modern medicine harkens back to these glory days where we figured out antibiotics. And then the idea that there could be diagnosis equals treatment equals cure. Like we got there. And I think we're still trying to live out those glory days, even though that's not, for the most part, what's plaguing us as a society
Mm.
medically. We're now in the realm of these more amorphous chronic diseases, but we are still trying to apply that framework of what are your symptoms? That equals a diagnosis. That diagnosis implies a treatment. That treatment should get you better. Part of that is the disease model of mental health, which, by the way, is an improvement of what we had before. The one that just said, like, he has depression as if it's a moral failing and pull yourself up by your bootstraps and all of that stigma. We've improved upon that where we said, this is not your fault. This is genetic. It's nothing you did. You just can't help it. It's a genetic chemical imbalance and we can treat it. And that's a well meaning, the spirit of that is well meaning. And when it works, which sometimes it does, hallelujah. But it isn't a perfect understanding of the mechanism for most people's anxiety and depression. And so for those folks, they end up demoralized, despairing because they took in that narrative. They said, okay, so I have a genetic chemical imbalance. That's what's wrong with me. Took the medicine. It shrug maybe worked for a little while. Then maybe the effects started to fade and I switched and this one seemed a little better, but then I got these side effects. And then I took an augmentation strategy and people go on that journey. But often you end up at the other end, not necessarily feeling all that much better. But I think what's more true there is that we might have been barking up the wrong tree, and that anxiety and that depression might not have been as simple as a genetic chemical imbalance, just low serotonin. We might have been missing the real mechanism.
It really strikes me about your work that as we're trying to get into a different relationship with fear, that we need to have more language. So, even just the way you categorize true and false anxiety, can you give us some sense of the difference?
So, false anxiety happens when something has gotten our physical body out of balance. It's usually something seemingly benign about modern life. We had a blood sugar crash, we're hungover, we had a bad night of sleep because we were up doom scrolling. That trips the body into a stress response. And for some of
Yeah.
us, we subjectively experience that stress response as a state like anxiety or even panic. And we would do well to identify what got the body into a stress response. Can we identify that, address it at that level of the physical body, and eliminate unnecessary suffering?
So when I think about false anxiety, should I almost think about like natural anxiety, like consequential, this equals that? Like is it just down chain from another problem?
So I like that. I don't know, but I'm going to go with that as a going hypothesis that it is a very, like, there's math to false anxiety. This couple glasses of wine plus this blood sugar crash plus doom scrolling equaled bad night of sleep, GABA converted to glutamate, blood sugar crashing, secreting cortisol and adrenaline. Now body is in a stress response equals anxiety. Yeah.
I often have many feelings that I don't want to have. And then sometimes my best friend slash producer, Jessica, says, hey, maybe you just need to take a walk and eat a banana. And it feels like she might have found a solution to false anxiety.
A pushback I'll often get is that someone will say to me, oh, yeah, 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 diet and lifestyle, that soft science kind of stuff. Sure, I'm sure that's fine for someone who's mildly worried. But surely you don't mean someone with serious mental illness, then they require a medication. I am not here to say that medication isn't helpful. I'm a psychiatrist. I prescribe medications that can be incredibly helpful, can be the bridge out of suffering. But I am here to say sometimes any degree of anxiety, even severe anxiety, if the mechanism is in fact inflammation or sleep deprivation or blood sugar, this is not a matter of degree, it's a matter of kind. And so you can be severely anxious and it can have a diet and lifestyle solution.
Yes.
And so, yeah, I think we don't like that because we feel like we have the real thing. We have the real diagnosis. So if you just tell me to take a walk, it feels like you don't get me. You think I must just be complaining a lot about a mild state of worry. I have the real thing. I'm debilitated by my symptoms. Don't tell me to do diet and lifestyle because that doesn't feel like it would be adequate. And you think I haven't tried it. Of course, I've tried it. A big part of how I want to approach helping people with this is kind of saying, humor me and try it like this, because I've really got my 10,000 hours in helping people out of a dark hole and really understanding what gets out of balance and how severely that can cripple us,
Yes.
just because modern life is so different from the conditions under which we evolved. Fact.
When I read your book, it felt like it had opened the door into a whole set of like symptoms and experiences and like our relationship with my body that I didn't realize require like we need guardrails. So if like false anxiety is sort of the check engine light, what are some of the very simple things that we can do to help turn that light off?
Yeah. So, and I love that idea of guardrails, because here's the thing about false anxiety. The idea is that mental health is physical health, largely. Not always, not completely. Mental health's complex, but a lot of it is physical health. This organ, our brain, just a piece of flesh in our body like anything else, and it gets out of balance. It tends to get more out of balance after 8 p.m., before 8 a.m. I think that I like to prioritize sleep, exercise, nutrition, and some version of what, it's a wiggly term, but stress management. And sleep is a big one, in that I really like treating people's sleep, because so many of us struggle with sleep. It's infuriating. We want to sleep better and we don't know how. And it's really so actionable, but it just requires some degree of understanding the mechanism of your body wants to sleep, your body knows how to sleep. But the modern environment with our blue spectrum light after sunset is suppressing all of our melatonin and making it very hard to sleep. So we just need to get strategic and prioritize better sleep through being smart about light and all of that. I like people to move their bodies in realistic ways. Like a 10-minute walk after dinner is something that punches above its weight class. I'm not asking someone to put on like a sports bra that dislocates your shoulder when you try to take it off. Like I think that what's realistic is move for 10 minutes after dinner, and that shifts the body out of insulin resistance into insulin sensitivity. Nutrition's a huge topic, but we have such a cultural eating disorder about it, and for the most part, I just want to nudge people back toward nourishment. We can become obsessive with changing the way we eat, and we can start to fear certain foods or feel like our bodies are fragile, and that's all counter therapeutic. We still want food associated with pleasure, with ease, with making sure we're sharing our meals with the people that we love, but just an eye toward, these are the foods that actually offer my brain the nutrients it needs. And I think that we got away from that somewhere, where we sold out our nutritional guidelines to the highest bidder. And we missed the traditional food wisdom that was passed down for generations.
Yeah.
That says, here's what's actually a nutritious food. Here's what's nutrient dense. Here's the balance of different things that gives your brain checks all the boxes of the nutritional scavenger hunt.
Yes.
Stress management, easier said than done, but generally saying no, knowing how
I
to,
like when you trailed off. You're like, generally having fewer things that you committed to and therefore are incredibly stressed out about.
we're both like, who
Who knew?
saying no. Yeah. It's not always easy to deliver a true no when we're socially conditioned to give our false yes, to people please, to avoid disappointing people, to avoid confrontation. But the more that we can hear our bodies no and then speak those words into the world, in Brene Brown's words, clear is kind, we save ourselves a lot of trouble and a lot of burnout by just knowing when something is a no.
Yes. That description of like sleep and nutrients and taking that mental oxygen and saying no, like that little bundle of things is so like a little and a very little people pleasing nest for me, where like those are the first things to go when I'm trying to meet everybody else's needs and then simultaneously like feel ambitious for a second in the middle. So I really like that tight description of all the ways that get into that genuine self-care place. Like what if I knew my body's own needs and then I like there actually tended to them.
A big way that women in particular are conditioned is to be in service, selfless service
Yeah.
constantly of those around us. And I think that I find that that is a helpful insight when we are struggling to give ourselves permission to rest and to give ourselves grace when we are not abiding by that social expectation. There are ways to just recognize, okay, that exists for a
Yeah.
reason. That's why I'm behaving in this way. Makes sense. I came by it honestly.
Yeah.
And it does not make me inherently bad. And it's not actually threatening my attachments or my survival if I receive right now instead of output in service of everyone around me.
I think I was definitely raised on the like feed everyone else first model. So I really enjoy hearing you think through all the ways in which our own physical health actually becomes our own ability to be resourceful and even know what we can handle in the first place. So we talked a bit about false anxiety, but we have many things, comma, Ellen, comma, that we definitely do need to be very anxious about. I apparently am collecting them over the course of my life. Tell me about true anxiety.
Let's speak exclusively in dictation speech, period. Enter new paragraph. So I think that with true anxiety, this is not something to pathologize. It's not something to fix. This isn't something we get to decaf coffee or gluten free our way out of. And true anxiety is not what's wrong with us. It is often what's right with us when we are able to viscerally connect to what is wrong in the world around us. So when we are feeling in our intact heart that something is out of alignment, off in our personal lives and our communities and the world at large, when we are really feeling a lot of that true anxiety, that's not something to pathologize. It's not something to shame ourselves around. Sometimes the culture says, why are you being so sensitive? And why can't you watch the news without crying? And that is actually, it's a sign of a very intact heart and wide open antenna. It's not necessarily true that we should all be that way, but certainly I think some members of the species, that's part of their role and responsibility is to be our feelers. And so if that's you, it's something to recognize and honor, but it is also something that requires great care because you're feeling a lot on behalf of all of us.
Yes.
You brought up fear earlier, and I think true anxiety is where it's the bucket that contains that inherent fragility of walking this earth in a human body. The fact that we will die, the fact that we will lose the people that we love, that there's suffering. And this is not something that we get to solve. I think it's our life's work to be with impermanence.
Yes.
But I think that so much of anxiety centers around control and uncertainty. And we just have to own that as humans. We do not like uncertainty and to not be in control. Totally. This is what comes with having a meat sack. But then we don't ultimately have control. So, how do we integrate that into our daily lives in a way that we can tolerate?
Mhm. I want to be I want to be in a healthy relationship with all of these kinds of ways there are to be afraid. I want to see what is true realistically. Want I think honestly because even just like what we've talked about so far, that first part where you described all of the ways in which we can sort of get physically or sort of causally like tripped up and then feel very panicked. I have not done a lot in my life to support feeling better. I'm always like on to the next, just trying to fix it by moving faster. And I think because I was like, well, look, dude, I've got real things to be scared of. I'm not like, I've just got to keep going because if I stopped and really thought about it, it would all feel like too much. But I really like the categorization you're laying out where we need to have a more, I don't know, like a more dynamic approach with the really real, all the things we can't change. But it does feel like when you are describing how this shows up in somebody's life, like there's like a sifting, like which stuff is just you really do need to sleep better and please stop eating wheat thins all day, which are fantastic. And which part is pointing at deeper issues that you may or may not be able to change.
One of the ways that you are a national treasure is this term that you taught me once. We were in a conversation and you used the term hyper agency. And that was like a shot through the heart for me because so much of what I represent in my work is this meaning making and this hyper agency. So it's forced a real reckoning for me. And it's been so helpful and important. And what I've come to appreciate, all of our false anxieties, they don't actually serve us. They are in the way of our ability to lead our most fulfilling, meaningful lives. But we can lose the plot really easily where we think wellness is the point, and
Yes.
let's orient our entire lives
That's so
around
good.
being virtuous, eating the right matcha, and basically we bring that into the foreground as if that were the point, as if we get to control our mortality or these thornier questions of true anxiety by eliminating gluten. No. However, to be our most clear-eyed, resilient, energetic, balanced version of ourselves in the face of the thornier questions, I think we have some work to do with our physiology because modern life has not set us up for success. It's an uphill battle to have good physical health in our world.
Yes.
And so I like to give people those tools, and then they decide to what degree does it make sense for them to put effort into it, because the effort should be commensurate with how much are you out of balance and suffering. If you're
Yes.
good,
Yeah.
if you're just lucky genes, then
Yeah.
don't do a lot. But if it's hard physically and you're having a lot of unnecessary suffering that's not serving you, roll up your sleeves, get some of that work done, not because that makes you virtuous, not because it escapes mortality, but because then here you are, balanced, able to carry out your version of your most fulfilling life, including grappling with these questions.
It reminds me of my friend. She's a psychologist, Lisa Demore. She's like, I won't even diagnose people if they're underslept. Like she just like makes a rule where she's like, until we figure out your sleep, I don't know what's wrong with you. And I really sort of like that sense that like there's just so many thermometers going on, and we really have to have a greater awareness of how we're actually calibrated before we can kind of just jump in.
When I observe how parents raise their young, even on the cultural level, what you realize is that everyone is just trying to figure out how do we raise good humans and how do we get a bunch of people with meat suits to get their needs met
Yeah.
when resources are scarce.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting to think all the different choices that different cultures make. And there's really no best system. They're just differently flawed. And sometimes we train the young people, you exist in service of others. You are securing attachment. You're seeing an extra warm smile from a caregiver when you sacrifice, when you're selfless. And that's kind of cool in that it raises pretty other oriented, attuned to the needs of others humans. And then sometimes, especially if they're like the eldest daughter, they end up so burned out and so disconnected from, well, what do I want? What do I need?
Yes.
Because they learned that actually threatens their attachment and therefore their survival, to focus on that over how do I serve?
Yes.
And so there's a tension between these different things. You also have cultures that I think coddle in all kinds of ways where you're maybe better at knowing your need, but there's almost a tyranny of those needs. And you aren't naturally adept at feeling attuned to the needs of others, And so there's no perfect system, but I like stepping back and observing and recognizing in ourselves what were some of the messages I got? What are the value systems? And giving grace to the people that imparted those on us because they were trying to raise good humans and distribute resources that are scarce to meet the needs of all these meat sacks. So I think that, it's not that anyone was necessarily trying to do us harm.
There's a thing my dad used to say that who I love, but did not serve me well. But he would always just say, like, there are people who care and people who don't. You care too much. May I suggest being one of those people who cares less? I know he was trying to save me from pain. I do. But I could never make myself care less about anything. I've always felt like I'm just one of those people who always on the too muchness scale of caring is like way over in the super Richter zone. One like huge gift I get from your brain and from your work is the feeling that like maybe I don't need to worry too much that caring is the issue. Maybe I can just take some steps to like participate with my body in regulating some of the basic stuff. And then maybe there'll be like a little sifting that happens. And the same stuff I'm going to care about tomorrow. There's no doubt about that. But there are some things that are going to like fall to the bottom and like lay there for a bit.
I think anytime someone's like, "Do you think you might be overthinking this?" I always think to myself, like, "Could you be underthinking it?" I don't choose how much we care. You can't fundamentally change how much you care, and there's really no benefit to saying how much you care is the wrong amount. But I do think that recognizing we all exist somewhere on a spectrum, to me, you can take a sort of more divine look at this or a more biologic look at it. I think either one works, but I think we are here all with a slightly different role in the ecosystem. And even in a purely biologic basis, that holds water. Some people have to care a lot. And it's actually really important that some people have to not care as much because we need some unflappable folks, but we also need some feelers. And so if that's who you are and that's your shoe size, then let's cherish and cherish those gifts, and you contribute to the world with those gifts, but it requires great care because that's a big antenna. This is a loud world. There's a lot to be felt. And we right now, in a way, our brains evolutionarily were not designed to triage. We are capable of being aware of everything that's wrong in the world. We evolved in these communities of maybe 120 people. So that's only so many problems. Now we know all the problems. And if you're a big antenna, big feeler person, whoa.
Yeah.
And if we have a big antenna, I think that there are practices we need to roll with that. There are fancier ones, but I think the best is crying. I think crying is really important medicine. I mean, I think we are due for a cultural rebranding around crying because right now, when we cry, the first thing we say is, "I'm sorry." We apologize for it. And then we try to make it as small and brief as possible, like the way you
Yes.
would pinch in a sneeze. I think we got it wrong. And crying was never the problem. It wasn't the burden on the people around us. It was the medicine. This is the wisdom of our bodies giving us a much needed opportunity to release some of that energy that you take in as a feeler. And so we need a lot more tears. I feel like in my early 40s, I learned how to cry better. I wish I had learned that a lot earlier. You can push crying to 11. There are false peaks in crying. We can cry a little bit and then someone says something funny and you kind of catch your breath and you laugh a little bit and you think like, I'm done crying. But I would say, no, you're not. And that's a false peak. And if you're lucky enough to catch a wave
Yes.
back in, you can go really deep to where your face is stuck in a grimace and time pauses and you're really mourning and metabolizing unexpressed grief and releasing so much of what we take in and move through and feel in this life. So I think crying is the most elegant treatment for having a wide open antenna.
I'd never heard the phrase like completing the stress cycle until I read your work. And I just love that idea that you're letting us land. Like, if we need to grieve, then let's cry. If we need to, like, if we feel scared, then you say, like, we can even, like, physically shake it off, like, make a actual full body shake and it, like, calms us, just like animals.
Yes. It's we are just oversized toddlers and like slightly elaborate houseplants and savanna animals, right? So what you'll see an animal of prey doing in the wild, if they've had an encounter with a predator and they're lucky enough to survive, afterward they complete the stress cycle. They will shake vigorously. And that seems to be how they discharge excess adrenaline and how their nervous system communicates to itself the threat has passed. It's once and again safe to be in my body. So we have to metabolize our stress. We have so much coming down the pipeline, very few opportunities to shake after every stressful email. And so what I actually do is I really just do a shaking practice. I find it's the most effective. And I put on a particular track of drum music, and for about 90 seconds a day, I'll just shake. And it's so ridiculous looking, but it's so free and effective that why not? When did that ever stop me from doing something ridiculous looking? So I think that just shaking for 90 seconds is a great way to complete the stress cycle, discharge the excess, but also I find that things bubble up. It's a way of excavating whatever's buried in our connective tissue that we're ready to release. And it often is a really good segue into a meditation because things come up and then you can be with that and hold it lightly after shaking.
I have had a champion history of avoiding most forms of meditation because I have found them to be not helpful. But your definition of meditation is one I can get on board with. I wonder if you could give us a little nudge in that direction.
The way I think about why bother meditating, which I get it, we all have tried and failed to meditate. I think about the muscle of present moment awareness. It's weak on all of us. It was already weak because it's adaptive for us to be thinking about the future, thinking about the past, never in this moment, because that's how we keep ourselves safe and learn from our mistakes. So we're weak at present moment awareness to begin with. And now we've got screens, so forget about it. But I think that what we do when we sit in meditation is we say, okay, I'm going to spend 2 minutes bringing my attention to my breath. Inhale, exhale. And inevitably, how that goes is a nanosecond later, our mind wanders. What many people start to say, I'm not good at meditating, I'm failing at this. That is actually the gig. You're right where you need to be. Because when your mind wanders, my knee hurts, I have to pick up milk, I forgot to respond to that text, it got buried. Then that's when you come to and realize your mind wandered, you get to choose to patiently, compassionately pull your attention back to your breath. And then inhale, exhale, mind wanders again a second later, acknowledge it, pull it back. And each of those times you pull it back is like doing a little biceps curl, a little rep, strengthening that muscle of present moment awareness. And that's consequential because not only are we more likely to not miss the moment in our lives rather than I'm in the future, I'm in the past, I'm in the screen. We're in the moment right then. But with more present moment awareness, you get to be in the video. You get to be in these moments of your life, good, bad, or ugly, but real and poignant. And you get to say, oh, here, this is happening. I'm in a state of loving awareness of everything exactly as it is. And it's also consequential in our relationships because we get so triggered. We're all such wounded little children walking around interacting in adult bodies with adult jobs,
Yes.
but we're really just like sucking our thumbs and trying to ensure attachment with a caregiver and wondering, are we inherently lovable or will we be cast out on the savannah?
Yeah. Ellen, I have had very little good language. I mean, so funny to say, like, I love negative language, but I love being able to describe like uncomfortable or terrible experiences because I do know that it it prevents us from having to suffer through pretending that they're not real. And I just like feel like you've given us so many categories and so many practices and descriptions of the way our body actually wants to move through some of these more difficult emotions. And I just want to say thanks. You have genuinely given me a new way to think about feeling weird.
And I think it's important to point out that I think you and I in our work, we offer really different and in certain ways almost antithetical medicines sometimes. I've come to appreciate that most of us probably need whichever medicine is the opposite of the one that we're being inundated with. And so,
Yeah.
like, if someone is already inundated with pro wellness and biohacking and optimization and hyper agency language and culture, like, don't read my book because it will really just exacerbate that and end up in a place of orthorexia and obsessive fixation on it. And that's usually someone who needs to come to the other side and get your medicine. And then I think that there's ways that we sometimes, I think we're all so parched for permission and allowance and acceptance because our culture does not really help us do those things very well. But once someone's intact in that way, we can veer into the word is too harsh, but it can sometimes be coddling where, but at a certain point, we actually need some of those strategies just to keep that foundation solid so that we can carry out our fulfilling life. And that's when it's important for me to come in and be like, do all these different things. And I think that I like being in an ecosystem with you where we have very contrasting medicines to offer and to think about, which different conditions we both treat.
And then we both end up loving limited agency, which is my very favorite thing. We can try and we cannot try. and, and both will do us some good. I could really use a little checklist on my bathroom mirror when I'm feeling anxious. It would read, did you sleep enough? Do you need water? Have you had too much caffeine? Do you need a banana? How about a walk outside? Because sometimes what we call anxiety is just our body waving a little flag saying, hey, something's off. It's that check engine light we can respond to with some compassion, or by setting down our phone, or going to bed a little earlier, or eating a healthy snack. But sometimes we're anxious because the world is anxiety producing, because the news is bad, because the future is uncertain, because being a person is freaking hard, because you are seeing everything clearly. Ellen offers us such practical, gentle wisdom on how to manage our mental health realistically. A little more kindness toward our high alert nervous systems, a little less pressure to optimize our way into peace. And if you're interested in a much longer argument about the relationship between anxiety and medication, and let's just be clear, she is not saying just get off your meds. There's a very helpful section in her book, The Anatomy of Anxiety, where she describes how to suss out false anxiety and true anxiety when it comes to common medications and their side effects. I just think it's all so helpful when we're trying to think about anxiety as part of our whole emotional, physical, and spiritual ecology. But at the most foundational level, maybe we should just be paying a little better attention to meeting our basic needs, reaching out for a moment of connection with a friend, finding something to do, even if it's small, to press against the despair in the world. Because we don't need to fix everything. In fact, we can't fix everything. We just need to live inside reality with a bit more steadiness and a bit more grace. So, if you're a super feeler, here is a blessing just in case you might feel it all. Blessed are you who feel it all. Yes, you who cried during commercials, you who carry the weight of the world in your chest, in your gut, on your skin, you who metabolize the world's pain and your own. For you are seeing it clearly, all of it, all of the heartache and heartbreak, the joy and the fear, the fragility and uncertainty, all that reminds us of our impermanence. May you learn to listen to the wisdom of your body, because sometimes we need to be reminded that we are complicated houseplants who need sunshine and water and good snacks. For blessed are the empathetic and tenderhearted, living in reality clearly with all we can change and all we can't. May your tears be a kind of medicine, and may you see their softness not as a weakness, but as a way of being holy and wholly human. Okay, thanks for coming. It was nice to have you. Also, hey, if you want more resources like blessings, reflections, culturally sassy essays, yes, I said sassy, where I rant about cultural myths that I find very irritating, come on over to Substack. I'm at katebowler.substack.com. And if you like this episode, would you please, pretty please, leave us a review on Spotify or Apple? It really helps more people find us. Help us nurture the algorithm. Help us feed it like water. That concerns me. Come find me on YouTube. I'll be over there, my whole face. Everything happens here, and everything happens because of some wonderful people. Jessica Ritchie, Harriet Putman, Keith Weston, Anne Herring, Haley Durrett, Megan Crunkleton, Anna Fitzgerald Peterson, Iris Green, and Catherine Smith. This is Everything Happens with me, Kate Bowler.